podcast I like to call Emily Speaks. Now, this podcast is called Emily Speaks for a specific reason. It is a huge middle finger to Autism Speaks, which, if you know, you know, and if you don't know, Autism Speaks is a ableist company who profits off of autistic people like me. So this is kind of a way of saying, screw you, Autism Speaks. This is my show now. In this podcast, on this generalized podcast, I'll be talking about autism, breaking the stereotypes, and just other things in general. I'll be having special guests on here, like my friends, maybe family members, who knows. But I'm excited to talk to you guys and do a podcast like this. I've always been debating on whether I should do a podcast or not, and a lot of people are like, please do a podcast. Like, I even asked my Instagram, would you guys like to see me do a podcast? And holy shit, that blew up. A lot of you said yes. So here I am. I'm really excited to get this started. And yeah, for this first episode, I wanted to talk to you guys about where it all started, where I got my diagnosis, how I got the diagnosis, what was the outcome of it. If you know the full story, congratulations. Cool. If you don't know the full story, well, this is the right podcast episode for you. Now, this is episode 1, where it all began. Now, it was back in the early 2000s where I got my diagnosis. This is from my parents' point of view, because obviously I was just a young, wee child. I really didn't speak that much. Other kids were speaking and having their first words. I wasn't having my first words. I just kind of sat there like, and everyone's like confused, like, well, why isn't she speaking? My parents are like, I don't know. So my mom had the right idea to go to the doctors and get a proper diagnosis. So basically they took me to this really great doctor, which I found out years later that he's actually the number one doctor, like, in the doctor community. I don't know. I found out he's a really important doctor. So basically they were like, hello, like, what seems to be the issue? Like, we want to get our daughter like diagnosed because apparently there is something wrong with her. So they did like a brain scan on me. Like, I had these suction cups on my brain to scan the brain waves. I remember I had my doll and I just kept holding on to it. And every time they tried speaking to me, I would just nod my head like this or just not speak. And I remember my parents had to do most of the talking because I wouldn't even say a word. I was silent. So after the brain scan, they put me in this big CAT scan, which, if you don't know what a CAT scan is this big machine that like goes through, like, you sit in this machine and you just like go through like this wave scanning thing. I don't really know much about CAT scans, but I went through a CAT scan, and that's when they found out that I was diagnosed with ASD, also known as autism spectrum disorder. Now, my parents were kind of confused and shocked, being like, well, what is this? Autism wasn't really a huge thing back then because it was the early 2000s. So they were kind of confused about what was going on. And then the doctors finally explained what ASD was, and they explained what I can and can't do. So basically, they said I couldn't drive, I wouldn't be able to be in a relationship, I wouldn't be able to make friends, have a proper school life. All of this on like my parents, and they were terrified. They were so confused and worried, being like, well, what does this mean for our kid? Does she like never get to speak again? And it was a whole scary thing for them, especially being parents with a child with a disability. I do have an older sister, but she doesn't have any disabilities. But it was quite scary for my parents to just see that coming, being like, oh my God. So, years and years of therapy. We went into speech therapy. I went into speech therapy. It was nice. I started speaking, which they couldn't get me to shut up. I think my parents sometimes miss the old days where I didn't talk, which I kind of understand why. But basically, I just kept talking and talking and talking. The more I went to speech therapy, the more I started talking and expressing my emotions. Back then, it was really hard for me to speak and express myself, and it was frustrating for both sides of the parties. It was frustrating for me because I want to communicate my needs. It was frustrating for them because they can communicate their needs to me. It was difficult on both sides. I am very thankful I have the people in my life who have been helping me, like my therapist, my speech therapist, everyone in my life who has helped me along this journey. Obviously, school was very difficult for me, elementary to middle school. Elementary was quite difficult. I really didn't talk that much, didn't really participate in anything just because I was a little shy. It gotten better with the more I went to my therapy sessions and I started talking more, started making new friends. It was quite interesting. Middle school was quite harder just because it's hard for any middle schooler. You're going through puberty, you got your parents on your back, the whole shabil. I got severely bullied in middle school. Obviously, I went to the same school for 8 years. It was a Catholic school. I'm not going to name the Catholic school just because I don't want to get sued. But it was just a difficult experience for me because the kids weren't that nice. And it was quite hard being in a school like that. I did went to a lot of special ed classes, which helped me in the long end, the long run, but it was quite difficult with kids bullying. It's just hard because when you see something like when something new appears and like you kind of just question it a bit. Like with autism, a lot of people didn't really know what that was, and it was quite scary because everyone was like, "Well, I don't know what this is." And they kind of react in a negative way, especially middle school. You have a bunch of like teenage girls and boys, like what are you going to do? A lot of bullying did happen with me and it sucked. It genuinely sucked. Everyone was mean, not everyone, but some people were like mean and rude, and it's hard because you don't understand why. That's the outcome. You never understand why they're doing this. But thankfully, I had some grateful friends on the way to help me. And the more that I talked about my diagnosis with my friends, the more it gotten better. And I forgot to mention this earlier how I found out about my diagnosis. So I think it was in fifth grade. Yeah, it was in fifth grade. Was it fifth or sixth? Yeah, it was fifth grade. And I remember coming home, I was frustrated and I was upset. I just sat in the counter and I just put my head like this. And I looked at my mom and I said, "What's wrong with me?" And she looks confused. She's like, "What do you mean, what's wrong with you?" And I said, "Well, there's something obviously wrong with me. I'm not like the other kids. Like, I obviously knew there was something up with me. I wasn't like the other kids with my learning. I felt like I couldn't communicate my feelings with these people. I felt like I was a broken record." My parents looked at each other, they nodded and said, "Read this," which, by the way, there was a Apple update on the phones. If you know how they do that. And it says like hello and like a different languages. And it said hello. And my dad goes, "Read this." And I said, "Hello." He goes, "All right, can you read this?" And I said, "No, I can't." And he goes, "Okay, try reading this." And I go, "Hello." And he said that you have a condition called ASD, autism spectrum disorder. And I was like, "What's ASD?" And he explained to me what it was. And I was just so confused, being like, "Wait, what is this?" Like, huh? Obviously, it was in fifth grade. I'm going to be confused. And the nice thing is that my parents like broke it down for me, being like, "Well, other kids like learn like mountains, you learn like stairs. You take it one step at a time." And it's quite hard because back then I was so frustrated. I even am now, like in my 20s, frustrated because I feel like I want to learn like my friends. I want to learn quick. I want to learn like they do. I want to be smart like them. And I'm very smart. But I've always dumbed myself down just because I feel like I can't learn like my other friends. The amount of times I compare myself to my neurotypical friends is quite exhausting just because I feel like that I'm not good enough. And I am. Any person with a disability is equally good as a neurotypical person. It's just quite draining and difficult because sometimes I feel like I'm not good enough to do anything. But when I got my diagnosis from my doctor, they told me I couldn't do these things. And look at me now. I have a relationship. I'm in school. I have a bunch of friends. I'm getting my license soon. Like, I have a job that I generally like. And it's so hard because people think that autistic people can't accomplish things, but the reality is We can. We are like people, but we just have different ideas of how to get it done. And sometimes we do have struggles. I have struggles a lot, like getting up in the morning, being motivated, getting my task done. It is hard. And I'm so grateful, like in high school, it gotten a lot better just because there's new people. I had no one I went to high school with went to my high school. So I was like, thank God. I met a bunch of new friends. I had a bunch of teachers who actually helped me and understood what I was going through. There was a special eds like meetup group, which I loved. I thought it was the most amazing thing to have. Sincerely, it was great. I met Colin there. I met a bunch of my other friends there. High school was a good experience for me, and I'm lucky that I went through it and found my people. I've met a bunch of autistic people who are like me and still are my friends till this day. It's just hard because in high school, you're going through a lot, and I felt like I wasn't anything. I was going through a lot. Autism with puberty is difficult because you're going through a lot of hormonal changes, and with autism you are a little emotional, and I'm very emotional. I'm a very emotional person, and I'm glad I get to sit down and educate you guys on everything. And the funny thing is that my teacher, my math teacher, suggested that I should go to a special needs school, like in high school. My mom's like, no, we're putting her in a regular high school. And I'm glad it worked out because I met the people that I liked a lot, and I met the people that I wanted to meet. I'm glad that I stuck out through middle school. It proves how strong I am, and I got to say screw you to the bullies and show them how great I'm accomplishing things. It's so hard because I feel like with autistic people, we always try to make the example of breaking the boundaries and breaking the stereotypes of what an autistic person actually is. And I talked about this with my mom yesterday, being like, I feel like I am putting too much pressure on myself. And she's like, well, what do you mean? And I said, like, well, I feel like it's my mission to break the stereotypes of for all autistic people, and that's a lot to put on one person, especially like me. I get overwhelmed easily, I get burnt out easily. So it's like, why put that pressure on somebody like that? I love breaking the boundaries and the stereotypes, and I like proving people wrong about autism, but sometimes it can be exhausting. Sometimes people think, oh, you're not autistic because you do A, B, and C. And I fall on the middle ground of you're not autistic enough to hang out with the autistic kids, but you're not neurotypical enough to hang out with the neurotypical kids. It is a difficult cycle and boundary. It is so hard to find that middle ground of who you are exactly. I have finally found that group of people where I feel accepted and loved, and I'm happy that I did. Growing up with autism is the most difficult thing that I feel like anyone can go through in life. It's frustrating, it's a lot, but it's also great because you get to prove people wrong and you get to make something beautiful out of it. I thankfully have made something beautiful out of it. For example, this podcast, and I feel like I'm very creative. I'm creative with the things that I do. I'm creative with the things that I like and everything else. And yes, I am drinking in Arizona on this podcast. It is my addiction. A little ASMR for you guys. Sorry if I don't like ASMR. I don't know. I'm happy that I broke the stereotype of being an autistic person. And it's hard because some people look at me and be like, well, you're not really autistic. And it's like, yeah, I am. Do you want me to show you the papers? The amount of comments I get all the time being like, you're not really autistic, or like, if you're autistic, then why don't you do this? Because everyone with autism is different. I think that is hard. People don't understand that every autistic person is different. We're not all the same. Everyone is on a spectrum. That's why it's called spectrum disorder, because it's on a spectrum. I am on a different spectrum than all the other people with autism that are on the spectrum. Me and Colin are very different. He's autistic like I am. His autism is very different from my autism. My friend who's autistic has very different autism from mine. And it just frustrates me because everyone thinks it's the same. I can tell you it is not. And that's That's the tea. I change subjects a lot, and I don't know if that's because of my ADHD or what, but I always switch topics. And I'm so sorry, this podcast is like very like you know what I mean. It's sometimes I get so caught up in talking where I switch the subject immediately and I forget about the subject I was talking about before. But I am excited to just talk to everybody about all of this. And I genuinely am happy where I am now. I used to hate having my autism. There's some moments where I do feel like I wish I was neurotypical, but sometimes I feel like with my autism, I feel like I can inspire others and inspire people to just embrace yourself, embrace being autistic. I used to hate being autistic. I remember in middle school, I was like, fuck, what do I do? I remember for I think it was a volleyball game. Yeah, it was a volleyball game and I wore all black because I didn't want to like wear my quirky outfit. Which by the way, in middle school I was really cringy. Like anyone from my middle school can tell you I was pretty cringy. I wore it was a Catholic school, so obviously I had uniform, but when dress up day came up, ugh, I was not cute. I don't know. I'm happy my mom dressed me for most of my days because without her, I feel like I would get bully harder. But yeah, no, I'm glad that I am where I am now and that I found who I am and that I get to inspire others with my autism. I try to. I don't want to have that big burden being like, oh, you have to break their stereotypical autistic standards so you can prove to everybody that you can break them. Like, for example, I'm not going to college. I dropped out of college this year, and I remember I was panicking because I'm like, well, I'm going to prove everybody right that I can't do college. My mom was like, well, are you happy that you're not going to college? I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty happy because I get to focus on the more important things. She goes, that's all that matters. If you are happy, that's all that matters. And I am happy what I'm doing now. And honestly, college, it's you don't really need it if you like obviously for nursing school and all like doctors and lawyers teaching you do need to go to college for that, but in some jobs like theater you really don't. And that's what I'm like that's what I told my friends, like I'm not going to go to college because for my degree I don't really need one. But I like where I am now. I'm comfortable with the state that I'm in, and I can't wait to educate you guys on autism and all that stuff. I hope that gave you a brief history lesson on me. I already have a few episodes planned ahead of what I'm going to talk about and all of that. I'm so excited because I have a special guest coming up in a few weeks. No, it's not Colin. I talked to him about him being on this podcast, and he's like, I'll think about it. But yeah, it's just nice that I get to talk to you guys and feel like we're actually having a conversation. I love educating people on disabilities or like anything else. If you guys want me to talk about a topic on the podcast, please leave a comment below of what topic you want me to talk about. I generally love doing these because it just makes me happy that I get to speak to a camera. And I've always loved podcasts. Like I like Pretty Basic, Queen Kirby's podcast, which is amazing. I used to like Unfiltered. I don't listen to them as much, but I do like their podcast. I think they're pretty funny. But I like listening to podcasts. It's so entertaining. But if you want to see more of this podcast, please like, subscribe, and comment. And yeah, I think every Tuesday a podcast will come out. I don't know. I'm still figuring it out. But yeah, spread kindness, spread love, and spread awareness. And I'll see you later. Bye, trippy hippies.